A viral tweet by me? What in the heck happened over there on Brewers Twitter this week? Plus, a Friday edition of Ask Me Anything you guys ask, and I will do my best to answer. Stay tuned in. You are Locked On Brewers.
You are Locked On Brewers, your daily Milwaukee Brewers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Brewers fans, welcome into the Locked On Brewers podcast. Thank you for always making Locked On Brewers your first listen each and every day. Do not forget, we are free and available on all podcast platforms. That's right, Apple, Google, Spotify, and of course, there are so many others. Do not be afraid to leave us a review. Let me know what you think of the show, good, bad, or right in the middle. It doesn't bother me. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Brewers. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Almost to 1,000 subscribers. Thank you to each and every one of you that have hit that subscribe button. If you have not, go ahead and make sure you do that. And also do not forget, we are over there on the Facebook world at Locked On Brewers Podcast. Get all of our content right on your news feed every single day. Of course, as you guys know by now, we're well 2 weeks into this. I am your new host, Brandon Snide. Like you, I call myself a fan with a microphone in my face. I am like you. I am a lifelong and diehard Milwaukee Brewers fan. I'm actually recording this podcast as we speak, just minutes away from American Family Field. There's some snow covering it right now, but in the summertime and the springtime, the Milwaukee Brewers, as you know it, do play their games there. You can find me on Twitter at Brandon_Snide. Again, it is a busy, busy time of the year. We are, 2 days away from Christmas. I cannot appreciate you guys in allowing me to steal some of your time to sit here and talk Milwaukee Brewers. The Locked On Brewers is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, welcome in. Like I mentioned before, let me start out by saying I don't get many viral tweets out in the Twitter sphere, okay? I tweet about my favorite teams. Maybe it's your favorite teams as well. The Bucks, the Packers, the Brewers, the Badgers. So this was kind of a new experience for me. Not going to lie to you guys. So earlier this week, I tweeted out about my displeasure overall in the lack of free agent movement within the Milwaukee Brewers. Now, some of you think it's about Brandon Drury. It's not always about one or two players. It's a collective thought process here for myself over the last, 3-ish years. So, and it kind of just exploded as a tweet. And maybe this isn't really a big viral tweet, it didn't get thousands of likes or views maybe views, but it didn't get a crazy amount of people that jumped into it. But for me, it was a lot. And I kind of wanted to just talk about it real quick before we get into the Ask Me Anything portion of the show. And it was generated towards the lack of the Milwaukee Brewers. And I'm going to pull up the tweet here so I can kind of give you exactly what I think is why Brewers fans were so involved with the tweet. Now, I tweeted out, it looks like it was about 2-3 days ago. And again, Brandon Drury goes to the Los Angeles Angels, signed a 2-year, $17 million deal. I thought as a Brewers fan, after you missed out on, Justin Turner, that it could be an option for you to go there. And I know a lot of you guys were on Drury as well. So I thought, hey, that would be an option for the Milwaukee Brewers. So I'm trying to pull up the tweet here. And of course it's, there it is. Okay. So I tweeted out, this was 2 days ago. If you're a Brewers fan and your excuse to me is why this team has spent $0 in free agency is because Mark Attanasio isn't a billionaire, go touch grass. Seriously, get lost. I'm sick of it. This city and this fan base deserves so much better. I really didn't think anything of it. It was just me kind of venting out to the world. Some of you guys thought it was about Brandon Drury. That was kind of the cherry on top. Again, a 2-year, $17 million deal, I think is something the Milwaukee Brewers should 100% have dived into. That's exactly what you gave McCutchen last year at $8.5 million. Brandon Drury is a little bit of a utility man. I know you can plug him in at third base, had 28 home runs last year. People will say, well, he didn't do really well in San Diego. Well, okay, he got traded through the course of last year, but it put him at American Family Field, and we'll see. Better than what I think the options currently are. But again, that's, I'll digress on that. There's really no more argument to have. He's going to Los Angeles. but 34,000 of you engaged within this tweet. That's, I think, one of the most popular, I guess, tweets I've had. And really my question is like, you guys are smart, you're educated, you know this. Are you happy or mad or somewhere in the middle with the lack of roster moves for your Milwaukee Brewers? Now, let me preface the lack of roster moves. You made trades. I get that. I respect that. I think those trades have been phenomenal. I think you get what Paul Bird, who covered William Contreras last year, who is a former major league pitcher who has talked about him highly of him, thinks he could be the best catcher. You've made moves, right? You make trades. You get in Abraham Toro. You get in Jesse Winker. You got 1 year. This is the final year of Jesse Winker's current deal. Is he going to have a contract here? You've made moves. You got some bullpen arms. I've liked the moves overall. I think the free agency part is the part that frustrates me the most. Is a Milwaukee Brewers are one of only 2 teams that have not made a move in free agency, and that's just where the tweet was going. And again, I'm not here to pat myself on the back. I'm not here to say, hey, look at me, or get on Twitter and follow me. You can if you want, but it was just, for me, it was something new because I've never experienced that. And having that many people on that tweet go in there and jump in there and leave me their thoughts. And it was kind of a back and forth for a while for most of you. It seems to have tended to lean towards more people are frustrated with the lack of the moves the Brewers have made. Again, lack of moves in free agency, not in trades. Obviously, the Brewers have been heavily involved, but it was really just interesting to see a lot of Brewer fans and a lot of opinions, which is awesome because we care about what this team does or does not do. As a fan, you want to see your team be out there and active. And the Brewers and president of baseball operations, Matt Arnold, certainly has been active, but you see some holes within this roster. And I get it. Every team has holes within their roster and inside their organization, but you still want to see a team with a core that I think most of us could agree, though, that it is a championship level core here. When I'm talking about Brandon Woodruff, Devin Williams, Willie Adames, Corbin Burns, of course, you got Freddie Peralta. I think those are core pieces to a championship. And when I see my team that I root for, because I am a Milwaukee Brewers fan, I am a Wisconsin sports fan. In fact, a fun fact about me, if anybody ever asks you, you can know this about me. I have a Bucks tattoo from when they won the championship on my left forearm. I am like you guys. I am a fan. I just get excited and I get angry and I get frustrated and I get happy, just like I'm assuming you do. And when I see a Brandon Drury, again, a guy who hit 28 home runs last year, 855 OPS, people will tell you he didn't have a good back half of with his time in San Diego. And I understand that. But at 30 years old, I'm taking the upside at playing at American Family Field, the same upside that people are telling me to leave with Jesse Winker. So again, I would have made that deal. Now, Cincinnati Reds, I should say, designated Mike Moustakas for assignment. Mike has struggled mightily since leaving Milwaukee. I don't know if that's something the Brewers would be interested in a reunion. I would probably say no, but again, he's out there and it's an option, and the fans are starting to lean towards that way. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I think I'm good on Mike Moustakas as much as I like him. So just to kind of go back and revisit, I was shocked by the engagement of the tweet, and thank you guys for all of your input. A lot of you guys that listen to the show, that follow me on Twitter, you engaged in that tweet, and I appreciate it. Again, I wasn't trying to go crazy with it. I was just trying to vent some of my frustration, because I'm sure, like you have some of that as well. So we'll let that go for now. And again, hopefully, it is early, guys. I understand it's only December 23rd and there's still time for the Milwaukee Brewers to make a move. And when you see guys like Justin Turner, who signed a 2-year, $22 million deal, who you see Brandon Drury, 2-year, $17 million deal, I feel like those were 2 affordable contracts for the Milwaukee Brewers to upgrade a position, in my opinion, that needs to be upgraded. Again, still time, but there's also things where I can be frustrated as a fan, and I can critique what this ownership and what the front office is doing. And I will continue, because that's what we do. Number one, this is a podcast. I'm going to dive into what the Milwaukee Brewers are not doing or what they are doing. I will nitpick at times what they do or do not do. That's part of my job. Number one. And number two, I'm a fan. Like I said at the open, I'm like you guys. I go to the bars, I sit down, I talk to the same people you talk to. And I'm frustrated at times and I'm happy at times. And that's just part of being a fan. And we're going to continue that throughout my tenure here at Locked On Brewers. So I hope you enjoy it throughout the course of the year. But if you don't, I understand. But we'll digress on the tweet for now. But tons of interaction from all of you. And I can see where a lot of you are frustrated, and I can respect where you guys that are not maybe frustrated. I can respect that as well, because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. And that's to bring a championship back to the Milwaukee Brewers. 1957 was too long ago, guys. All right. So we'll digress on that for now. But a show note for next week. Of course, Christmas is here. Merry Christmas to all of you. Bringing in the new year here next week. There will be no episode on Monday because Christmas is on Sunday. So I'm going to have some family over. Of course, I'm sure you guys will all have plans as well. I don't think, your first thing to do on Christmas or the day after is turn on and listen to Locked On Brewers podcast. But if it was, I do appreciate that. So today I wanted to have a little fun. I tweeted out yesterday that I wanted to do an Ask Me Anything episode. You guys never disappoint. Always interactive with the podcast. So thank you so much for all that. You guys asked, and I'm going to do my best to answer. It's a ton of more questions, some personal questions, some Brewers questions, some food questions. So we'll dive into that. But first, guys, like I said, it is really close to Christmas. The fun is right around the corner. I'm sure a lot of you guys have plans with your family, cousins, aunts, uncles that you haven't seen. But please, as a friend of yours, I don't even have to know you, but I care about you. And I want to make sure you are smart this holiday season. And did you guys know that driving under the influence of marijuana is illegal? It is, believe it or not. That's right. Driving high could get you a DUI. And if you're wondering if law enforcement can tell when you're driving high, well, everyone else in your life can. So can they. Your friends can tell. Your coworkers can tell. Even your parents can tell. So what makes you think law enforcement can't? Be smart, guys. Well, they can, okay? I'm telling you right now, they can tell. And if you feel different, believe it or not, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by NHSTA. Thank you for making Locked On Brewers listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, guys, you already know me by now. It's been a little bit over 2 weeks. You know I absolutely love the interaction between you and myself and the show. And again, we're going to have some of you guys on this show, and I'll talk about that at the end of the show coming up here in a few weeks. So without further ado, you guys asked and I answered. It's time for a fun Friday of Ask Me Anything. And the first question, we're going to go over to Twitter. Of course, we're just talking about Twitter. And Zach on Twitter asks, who is your favorite Brewers team of all time? He goes with 2018. That's a good one. I'll probably agree with you there, Zach. 2008 was also a lot of fun. That back end of 2008 was just absolutely electric, man. The city came together. It was the start of the Brewers, I want to say run. I mean, they were there in 2011 too. Yeah, it was just first time in the playoffs in 26 years. 2008 was the best feel, I think, overall. You're not having experienced that before and having that first time going to the playoffs. CC Sabathia comes in, just dominates for the Milwaukee Brewers. That was just absolutely a blast. 2018, though, you're probably right. You're a game away. I still think you're a player or two away from going to the World Series. Again, Brandon Woodruff hitting a home run in that against Clayton Kershaw Game 7. I'd probably agree with you there, Zach. 2018 was just magical. I mean, it just felt like everything was going the Brewers' way. And of course, they lose Game 7 to the Los Angeles Dodgers, who go on to lose the World Series. I believe it was the Boston Red Sox off the top of my head, and I think the Brewers would have probably won. So I'll go with 2018 as well, Zach. 2008, I think, is right there for me as well. So good question. Let's see here. Nick on Twitter asks, why are there fans who are content with our owner being a penny pincher? Look, I don't want this podcast to sound like I'm always complaining about what the ownership is or is not doing, or I don't even want to feel like I'm on Twitter complaining about what it is that they are not doing. But I just want to win a championship, as I'm assuming if you guys listen to this podcast, so do you, right? I feel like there are moves out there that are or were at least out there to improve the roster. And again, a roster that I think is pretty darn good. And you add a William Contreras to that. You add a Jesse Winker, who's going to have a contract year coming up. I think you have the pieces there, and you're just a few things away from maybe being really, really good. And again, your friends down there in St. Louis are improving their roster in free agency. You look at your good buddies to the south, I-94 in Chicago, they're improving. Dansby Swanson gets a massive deal from Chicago. They're targeting Drew Smyly, of course. I mean, they've got, they're making of that. Boxberger went to Chicago. So, I mean, they're improving parts in their roster. You feel like that's the Brewers can do that as well, especially again, what we talked about. And I don't want to keep, hitting the same topic here, but, Justin Turner, Brandon Drury. I don't know if Luis Urias is your your starting third baseman every single day. Some of you think so. I tend to think he can be. I don't necessarily want him to be. I think he can be a super utility man here for the Milwaukee Brewers, second base, shortstop, third base as well. But I would like to see them solidify that position. Between that and kind of answering whatever your closer is, those are, I think, the two major question marks. And I think you've got a pretty solid team in Milwaukee as long as everybody stays healthy and your starting pitching is back, which they are. But again, I just don't want you guys to think I'm always complaining about what the ownership is or not doing. I don't know why fans are content with Mark Attanasio. I think the pressure should be on Mark Attanasio to bring in a competitive roster, again, that is good right now. And could it be better? Sure. Look what the New York Mets are doing. I'm not saying the Milwaukee Brewers are the New York Mets, or they even need to be like the New York Mets. $502 million payroll is insane. I get that. But the Brewers can easily be right around 150, 155, maybe even 160. And again, it's December 23rd. We'll see where they're at. But fans, I think, need to demand more from their owner. I do. I really do. And I think if you're a Milwaukee Bucks fan, you know as well, for the longest time, people told Milwaukee Bucks fan, myself included, that you can never win a championship because you're a small market. The small market thing has got to go, guys. It's got to go. I understand it's a real thing. Sure, it is. But if you have an owner that wants to win, he's going to find a way to win. Okay. And that's not by signing Andrew McCutchen to an $8.5 million deal thinking you went all in. It's just not. Okay. There's owners out there who have less money than Mark Attanasio. All owners are making money. All franchises are making money. I don't want to hear about we're not making money. We're operating the red. Then don't buy a baseball team. Don't buy a baseball team. Or don't go buy a soccer team while you buy a baseball team and let it sit there while you don't do anything to improve the roster. Simple as that. Hold your owner accountable to the lack of movement here going forward. From now on, that's just me. Hey, look, that's just a fan. Okay. There's no numbers, no X's and O's right there. That's just me coming to you. All right. Good question, though. I appreciate it, Nick. Good question. All right. Jesse, who is also on Twitter. What if we weren't spending? So another good question here. Back-to-back money questions here, it looks like. But we signed Brandon Woodruff, Corbin Burnes, and Willy Adames. What would you think about us not spending then? Yeah, I mean, that's first off, that's an incredible question, Jesse. And thank you, as always, for being a big fan of the show. Thanks for all your engagement over there on Twitter. Really, honestly, I think I'd be okay with that because it would not only are you locking up your core, but it would fix the uncertainty within the Milwaukee Brewers, right? You're able to retain three of your core pieces. And again, Woodruff, Burnes, and Adames are three of those pieces. For me, and I'm sure most of you guys, much happier about where the offseason is, but we're not even hearing anything about where the Brewers are with those contract negotiations. I'm not even sure it's been approached. Now, I know Willy Adames has said before that they've approached him and that, but that was last year. I haven't heard anything recent within the past 4-6 months, roughly. So again, it's kind of like if you're a Packers fan, and again, if you're listening to this podcast, I think there's probably a good chance you're also a Packers fan. Every year it feels like, okay, well, let's get into free agency, let's sign some guys. When it turns out to be, you're just signing your own guys because they're good. Aaron Jones, right? David Bakhtiari, those are good guys. Those are guys that came up in your system and you signed. It's the same thing with Corbin Burnes, Brandon Woodruff, and you traded for Willy Adames almost 2 years ago. Those are your guys. Keep them where they're at. And yeah, I would be, Jesse, to answer your question, I would be fine with that because that would mean that you're putting your core in place. You're keeping them long-term, and you're telling fans, you're telling your team the window to win is now, right? To me, that's what it does, because you're keeping, and I'm assuming you're going to pay a lot of money for those three players, which is not going to be cheap, which would make sense to why you're not in free agency. But we got to see that happen first. So yeah, I think that's an incredible question. But again, I think we got to see it first. So thank you as always for your question, Jesse. That was a great start, guys, for this. We will continue to answer your questions, as one person wants to know what my favorite meal might be. This ought to be fun. Thank you for tuning into the Locked On Brewers podcast. It is the off season, yes, and sometimes it is okay, guys, to just have some fun, and we will continue to do that with a fun edition of Ask Me Anything on this Friday, snowy Friday afternoon, morning, nighttime, wherever you may be. It is gloomy and snowy in Milwaukee. Thanks for some of those great questions to kick us off. Let's dive right back into more of your questions. And we're going to go out to Matt, who asks a food-related question. And he goes, if you had to eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be? Easy answer here. We kind of answered it on Twitter earlier today. I am a huge Raising Cane's fan. I know they don't have any in Milwaukee. They have one in Madison. They're supposed to be coming to Milwaukee eventually, but they're down in Illinois too. And it's the only reason I go to Illinois, really, is so I can get Raising Cane's. And if you haven't had it, maybe you don't even know what I'm talking about. There's some people in my life that have never heard of it. Raising Cane's, it's chicken tenders and fries. It is so delicious. Talking about it right now just makes me hungry, makes me want to go eat. But if you take that away, because that's an easy one for me. If you take Raising Cane's away, I don't want to go in the doghouse. I love my wife's meatloaf and mashed potatoes, home cooked meal. Probably go with that. But you really can't go wrong with either one. I'll take either one. But if you haven't gone to Raising Cane's and their famous cane sauce, I'm telling you guys, you gotta check it out. Talking about it is just making my stomach growl. It is so good. And again, there's no sponsor to the show, but I'm telling you right now, Raising Cane's, I'm here. I'm listening. All right, Bill. So we're gonna get to Bill's question here. A great listener of the show wants to know: do we give Corbin Burnes the Bobby Bonilla deal? Okay, so those who don't know, for the Bobby Bonilla deal, they're paying him, I believe it's right over $1 million. It's like $1 million and some change. I think it's until he's 72, like in his mid 70s, right? $1 million per year. So once a year. If you are serious about competing, Bill, for a title, and I would imagine, and I would hope that that's what the goal is here for the Milwaukee Brewers and this ownership and the front office, you do anything and everything to keep Corbin Burnes. I'm telling you right now, you let Corbin Burnes out of your door, what is this? What do you do? Like, where does this go? What is this? What happens to this roster? If you're serious, I think you got to do whatever you can do to keep Corbin Burnes. So I say yes. Not sure if that's something Corbin Burnes would want, but if he is off, if he was interested, if he was, that's something he wanted, then at some point, yeah, I would say yeah. And at some point, again, you got to start negotiating here with Corbin Burnes if you haven't already, because I haven't seen anything to indicate that they have been. I love the question, and again, Bill is a great listener of this podcast, and him and I don't always see eye to eye, but that's what makes this fun, guys. That's what makes this fandom all about. Look, we don't always want to agree. We don't always have to agree. We all want the same thing, though. And sometimes we just have different avenues of approach. Bill doesn't always like my take on Mark Attanasio and the ownership and the money and the lack of money. But again, Bill wants to win a championship. So do I. We got to meet in the middle somewhere. If that means giving Corbin Burnes Bobby Bonilla money and operating, I think Bill in his question says 16.5% of the payroll, leaves the Brewers with a lot of room to negotiate, other deals throughout their roster or go out and make moves. So yeah, again, you're not going to get another Corbin Burnes. He could be, and I think he is the Brewers' best pitcher ever in franchise history. Is that a little bit of a stretch? Some of you may disagree, but I think overall he's, Cy Young winner 2021. I think he's your best pitcher. I don't think it's necessarily close right now on the roster. I love Brandon Woodruff, but it's not close. Corbin Burnes is your ace, and he's the anchor of your starting rotation. You give him whatever he needs to keep him in Milwaukee, because if you let Corbin Burnes hit the open market, look out for Garrett Cole's money, because it's coming. Good question, Bill, and thank you again for always listening. Let's get into one more question here, and Andrew asks, are you happy with the office this front office has put on the field the last 2 years? That's a good question, and I'll start with 2021. Look, it hasn't always been pretty. This team has had some moments for sure. It's, overall, I think it's just been disappointing. In 2021, I think was a little bit better. Obviously, you win 95 games. You just feel like that was a really good year from top to bottom, roster wise, pitching wise. And it was a major letdown in the NLDS. I mean, again, like I said, winning 95 games and just stinking it up in the playoffs against Atlanta, who goes on to win the World Series that year. But I think at the very bottom line, it's just been too inconsistent for me. You look at 2021, 27th in hits, 18th in home runs, the top 15 in RBIs at 11. It's just, to me, it doesn't scream. 27th in average in 2021. It wasn't a good season, I think, overall. Again, Luis Urias led your team in hits that year. I don't know. It didn't really get much better in 2022 either. Rowdy Tellez obviously led them with 35 home runs, and Yelich had 145 hits, which kind of surprised me a little bit when I was looking that up. But 2022, it really didn't get any better. You struck out a ton in 2022, came for almost 1,500 strikeouts throughout the team. But again, they hit a lot of home runs. They batted in a lot of runs in 2022. They took a lot of walks in 2022. It wasn't bad, but they struck out a lot and they didn't really hit for average. So I don't know how it's kind of an up and down. Again, inconsistent for me. Just both those years, really just inconsistent. The Brewers won 86 games last year. And of course, 95, like I mentioned in 2021, just inconsistent. And I am disappointed. What could change though? I mean, really, when you look at it, what is something that you look at these rosters? We'll look at 2021, for example. What difference are you making? Christian Yelich is your common denominator for both those, in my opinion. Injuries, being in and out of the lineup, changing, his motion, changing his swing, changing where he stands at the plate. That's been an issue, and the Brewers have depended on him a lot. When you pay him that much money, he's your common denominator there. And I think when he, isn't up to par to what we're used to seeing Christian Yelich, again, with 2018, we talked about that year, winning the MVP. And again, 2019, if he doesn't get hurt in Chicago, I think he wins back-to-back MVPs. We just haven't seen that same Yelich. And I think that's where it starts. So it's inconsistent. I don't necessarily want to say it's on the front office. I think the front office has made decent moves in those years. I mean, again, I'm super critical, but I'll tell you where credit is due. Again, Hunter Renfroe, Colton Wong, those were good additions to a roster. Those are your top two hitters a year ago. You got to have more of Christian Yelich. And again, is that something that's on the front office with the Christian Yelich, that deal that obviously is not going to be tradable, in my opinion? Maybe, but I think Christian will tell you himself that he needs to do better, and I think he will do better. Again, 2023, there's no shift. I'm curious to see where Christian Yelich, again, a guy who led the team in hits with 145 last year. So again, will he see an improvement going into 2023? I hope so, because I think if you do see an improvement from Christian Yelich, you see an improvement from a roster overall and everybody around him. So great questions. We're going to end it there. I appreciate you guys for interacting with me over there on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, dropping all your questions. But look, a lot of me talking on this podcast. I want to hear from you. And I'm asking you guys, do you want to join me? I'm serious. I'm really serious here. Starting in January, every Friday, I'm going to have guests, and it's going to be you guys. Yes, you fans, listeners of this show. We can chat. Look, we can keep it really open too. We can chat about life. We can chat about baseball. We can chat about favorite states you've visited, favorite vacation spots. Wisconsin Dells is mine. What's yours? Again, we can keep it strictly Brewers baseball. We can keep it MLB baseball. Whatever it is you guys want to talk about, I'm going to call it Fan Feature Friday. It's an opportunity, and I don't know who else does this. Maybe no other podcast out there does it, but I'm going to try it. I think it's fun because I'm a fan like you. I want to get to know you guys. We can meet up at American Family Field maybe later this summer. We're going to call it Fan Feature Friday, where you guys come on the show and we chalk it up and we just have a blast. And that's what we're going to call it. You can go ahead and shoot me a DM at Brandon_Snide. You can shoot a DM at Locked On Brewers, or you can shoot us a message on Facebook at Locked On Brewers Podcast. And in a few weeks, we'll get it going. We're going to let the holidays go here. Christmas is coming up after New Year's, and then we'll get it rolling going forward. So every Friday, look forward to that coming up. Again, thank you guys for making this podcast part of your daily routine. I cannot tell you enough how much I appreciate it. You can find the Locked On Brewers podcast everywhere you get your podcasts. We are on Twitter. We are on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter at Brandon_9. Find the show on Twitter at Locked On Brewers. And of course, on YouTube at Locked On Brewers. Thank you for making Locked On Brewers your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reaction, big game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. As always, thank you for always supporting me, supporting this podcast, supporting the Milwaukee Brewers. And until next time, have a very Merry Christmas. Have a safe Christmas. Enjoy the time with your friends and family. And of course, no matter what, go Brewers.